All right. And before I guess we get too deep, new faces, do we want to do some introductions?
Sure. Guessing I'm the new face. My name is Yusuf. I'm currently interning at Salesforce with Heroku. Uh, yeah, and I'm working with Terrence.
Nice. Awesome. Great to hear. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Terrence, did you want to add something?
Yusuf is working on adding custom build pack support to our build system. So he's been playing around with all that stuff, and I see there's a topic under one of the future agenda things for talking about exposing functionality to download build pack. So I told him to come to this meeting to talk about it.
I moved that to the current agenda. Should I also have left it in future?
No, it's good. It's good. We could talk about it today for sure.
Okay, cool.
All right. Any note takers? Any volunteers to take notes for this meeting? Crickets, crickets. It's all right. We don't have to.
I can do the. I think Yusuf, I have to jet at 1/2 past. But
Okay.
I can do at least up till the hour.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah. Depending on how fast we go through these, it should be fairly quick. We should be able to get through all of it. All right. So status updates. For myself, all I could talk about is a little bit of the release planning part, where I've talked to David, who's kind of the owner for Pack, and it sounds like we're going to hold off on the release a little bit. I think the anticipation was a week, which means that we would try to go to feature complete this week and release next week. Still kind of pending on that, so like that's sort of a little bit nebulous because there are a set of changes that we want to, or pull requests that we want to get in before that time, but that's more or less the current working timeline for that.
This is for point 20.
Yes.
Release is delayed a week or potentially a week.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Any other status updates on the platform side? Cool. All right. I think that speaks to the release planning as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for actually nothing that requires discussion.
I think last week, actually, when you weren't here at platform, we were talking about some of the project descriptor changes, and we didn't want to bucket them into point 20 because obviously a lot of that stuff is feature frozen and underway. Is there a process for when the 0.21 milestone and stuff gets made?
Sorry. Not necessarily. We could definitely create one if we want to start assigning stuff to it.
I may have just made one and started assigning stuff, but I wasn't sure what you all were doing in the past.
No, I would only say that if there's sort of some contention with the maintainers, they might move stuff around. But at this point, feel free to do so.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So that speaks to that. The next item is, the general topic. So exposing functionality to download build packs. Yeah, who wants to take that on?
Sure, yeah. I added it, so I'll go ahead and take it on. So as Terrence mentioned, we're exposing custom build back functionality in our platform, I guess, our builder. And there's this broader issue that was opened about a year ago about exposing that like detection downloading package logic instead of re-implementing it, since a lot of things might change. I opened up, so I think extracting the downloading logic for a use case is a little bit trickier if we want that, or exposing that is a little bit trickier if we want it to be if we want to refactor like the existing pack methods, like add Buildpacks to Builder and whatever, to use that download Buildpack URI, because we're trying to avoid Docker. So right now, for my specific use case, I'm not addressing the whole issue, but I opened up a draft PR to expose specifically the extract Buildpacks function. That's one that I think is easy to just move from internal to just a public facing package. That makes one less thing we have to re-implement. And then I also had a few broader questions about that that issue that I linked.
Okay, and to just for my own sanity, right? So the idea, I know we've kicked around, and then maybe you haven't been part of those discussions, but we kicked around the idea of maybe Pack moving to a plugin system where you have different executables that kind of like utility executables, right? And this being potentially one of them, where you could download Buildpacks in other platforms outside of Pack. That's not what this is targeting, at least not yet, right? This is simply moving internal function to be exposed through the Go library, essentially. Is that right?
Right. And then I think the broader issue is not to like have like a CLI plugin or anything, but for like a consuming Pack as a library to have a kind of helper method for downloading Buildpacks.
Cool, that makes sense.
Cool.
All right, so are there any, I guess, questions about that? Or just a kind of general announcement that this is happening and we should look at the PR?
So yeah, the PR isn't like ready to be looked at, but I was just a general question is it okay to expose that extract Buildpacks method? Is there any reason why we shouldn't?
No, I think it aligns very well with, again, the direction that we're going. And this would be a good first stopgap to enabling that functionality and then extracting it even further, hopefully in the future.
Cool. Yeah, that's all I had. That's just my question.
All right. Let's see, moving on. Do we have any RFCs that are open? We do have 3, actually 2. One of them is in draft. It looks like all of these are in final comment period. So yeah, like those should be merged in this week, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, because they're in FCP last week. Do you need help merging these in, Javier, since you're assigned? Do you have access and permission to do that? Do you need me to do that?
I know I ran
Writing on
into
the bot?
issues in the past. I think right now it's just a availability or capacity, right? I don't know, Terrence, if you're volunteering to merge them in, that'd be great. But if not, I could definitely give it another try.
Are you saying you don't have time to do it?
In a roundabout way, yes.
Yeah, I can take a look at merging them in. Because I think some of them have been open for like a month or so. So
yeah, their FCP period shouldn't have been that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, I say that, but 22 days, that's pretty extensive. Or yeah, for the visual one. Cool, appreciate it. All right, I think we're done with the RFCs. Moving on, Natalie, I believe you have a couple topics.
I think the first one that I added, you could just remove it because it's already been closed by Anthony's PR. But the discussion around that issue sort of led me to wonder about, is there a view of the priorities? Sorry. Is there a view of the priorities for the platform team? How would we go about discovering that?
I would definitely say that there isn't outside of milestones, right? So the milestones kind of depict the sort of priority of desired issues to go in. But anything more granular than that, it's just really up to the availability and capacity of each individual contributor slash maintainer. Is there,
Anything in the 020 milestone?
sorry, could you repeat that at the beginning of that?
Because we have one milestone for pack, but I'm assuming that all of the stuff in that one would be the like higher priority items from the maintainer's perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a little unfortunate that David isn't here to speak a little bit more about that, given that he is the owner. But feel free to reach out to him with those sort of questions, and I think we could get further clarity, especially as we get closer to the release date. We should be able to start bumping stuff out that we know for sure isn't going to be able to make it. Does that answer your question, Natalie?
Did I think, I mean, I'm also thinking about those like, not of very high urgency, but still maybe high importance. Things like build kit.
Mhm.
That wouldn't necessarily show up on a milestone, but how would someone discover that that is something that we're, thinking about, looking at? Any other things like that come to mind as well?
I think that's really hard to do in an open source project unless you're talking about specific teams, right? Because again, it goes back to the individual contributors and their commitment, I guess you could say, to being actively working on something. And I'm not entirely sure that that's something that you can, for lack of better words, enforce on anybody, right? I think the build kit stuff might be an exception only because it is somewhat tied to the roadmap. And I know that there's been some discussions, and I believe you're the one that brought it up about potentially having better visibility into the higher level items in which build kit would fall into that. And then in that particular case, we could have somebody that's more or less owner or assigned to that sort of stuff or piece of work. But anything more, smaller or outside of the roadmap, I realistically don't see a way that we can have something like that. As an example, right? Like we have contributors, Immortal Human, right? I don't know their real name at this moment, but they volunteered for some doc related issues, right? It would be difficult to say like on a day-to-day basis that he is actively working on it. It really becomes more of a something that we just ping and track over time as to whether or not there's any sort of traction on that. These are all just projections of my opinions and perspective. I'd be definitely open to hearing others, or if there's a possible solution that you have in mind.
I think at one point we had talked about, what if we had a project board that could show cross-cutting stuff related to the roadmap and like things that almost made it onto the roadmap. I think we were just, trying to really narrow the scope. And then the other thing that I thought of, which like, maybe it would be easier to, rather than maintaining a project board, just having labels, which I think we already have that specifically relate to roadmap items. And I don't know, just I find myself, losing track of all the different initiatives and things that we've talked about and wanting to know what's going on with X, right? Without having to have that organically spring into my mind. I just want to like go to a central place. Like these are the things that are important to the project. Here's their status.
Yeah,
achievable.
Go ahead, Javier.
The only thing I was gonna say to that was kind of reiterate, like, I think roadmap and things that almost made it into the roadmap are things that are possible. But I think anything lower level than that, more granular, I find it difficult to see a solution for quote unquote managing other people's, work, if that makes sense. Or getting visibility to that level.
Yeah,
for
that's fair.
a contributor. Sorry, go ahead, Terrence.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to Javier's point, like, we don't, it's not a company, like, we don't, I mean, I guess to some degree, like, VMware pays people full time, and so there's some degree of control that whoever is managing those people have over what they prioritize and work on. But generally in open source, right, like, people will work on what's important to them or what they're inspired to do or make time for, whether that's through work, like Yusuf working on exposing, like, this was never a priority, right, for PAC, but if he opens the PR and it gets merged in, it will happen, even if it never, it never made it in as a thing that we need to put into a milestone, right? But it's a thing that we as Salesforce want, so we will pay someone to do it, right? And I think that's the kind of nature of some open source stuff. I think potentially the thing you're asking for, Natalie, is maybe not platform specific, but you probably in your head know the stuff in implementation as a maintainer on the implementation team. And so platform is probably the big gap there. This seems to me to be more of a like broader project. Ideally, like what you want is something at a broader project level for even for stuff that isn't super granular, like even for the roadmap stuff of like being able to kind of have a place to track that. I think this was like basically one of Anthony's like asks multiple times of like, how can I come into this project? And I guess in your case, not just come to the project, someone who's heavily involved in the project, easily be able to kind of see where things are and kind of the status of those things.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, maybe, right, I am coming from an angle where, I'm a VMware employee who's paid to work on this project, right? So in some sense, when I'm asking myself, what should I work on? My personal preferences, they obviously play a role, but I want to work on the things that are most important to the project, that will most help the project. And so how do I know what those things are? Is the question that I guess I'm trying to answer. Which, as you said, I have some idea, right? There's different places you can go. There's roadmap, you can go to the roadmap, but then the roadmap just really says like, this is what we plan to do. If I want to ask like, okay, well, what's the status? Like, where can I get involved? It kind of drops off there. Right? You have to have some more like inside knowledge at that point to proceed. Which again, I do have. I'm just trying to make it easier for myself and others.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. It may be worth revisiting this. I don't know. I don't know if you want to powwow on how we can do this better at kind of a broader project level. To me, this doesn't feel necessarily specific to platform, though platform is a player in this space for sure as a sub team.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I wonder if it's worth revisiting in the core sub team meeting or core team meeting, which I believe is coming up soon. But I definitely like the idea of the board for the roadmap and items that almost made it onto the roadmap. I think there's some questions about who maintains that project board or who are the people that are maintaining that project board. That plus I know GitHub recently released a bunch of improvements to issues where epics can create or spin up different issues, and that could maybe create a little bit of a better organizational aspect to more granular issues and the overall status of those larger stories. So maybe all that kind of ties into help.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Moving on, Linux download stats.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about this in Slack. I just wanted to surface it in this meeting because I've been, recently curious about what are the stats around pack downloads, how many downloads do we have? And, from what I'm seeing, majority of our users are on Linux. And, we in the last year provided alternative ways for people to install pack on their Linux machine. And yet I don't think those downloads are reflected in the numbers we see on the GitHub release page. So I would love to have a more accurate picture of what the usage is. But it seems like nothing is like just right there for the taking. We'd have to research it. And so I'm just surfacing that for the people who might care.
So what's the end goal of seeing the download stats? Is it just curiosity, or is there something more to it? Is it more analytical?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's like, again, this is sort of coming from maybe the VMware mindset of, right, we must have metrics for our team, right? So this is, just kind of like, maybe not there's no like practical use for knowing these numbers, but it is nice, right, to have a reflection of how the community is using our software.
Okay, so I guess where I maybe want to take this is, like, what is the benefit of having these sort of metrics, right? And I know that we've added analytics to our homepage or our marketing site, doc site, whatever you want to call it. And then we've added or had, kind of this idea of adding metrics to things like the tutorials on Katacoda and stuff like that. And I think the idea of those metrics do kind of play a part in like the overall health of the project. And I guess the way that I'm trying to frame this is, it seems like the things that you're asking for are maybe not just valuable for VMware, but valuable for the overall health of the project, right? And so if we're able to frame it in that way and really make that the objective, then I do wonder if we could do better, right? Of actually satisfying that request.
That sounds like a big project of how do you get measures for the overall health of a project?
So recently I've been looking, there's a Chaos Linux Foundation something, I forget what it is.
I am familiar with the thing you're talking about, Javier. Like, I've looked into it, but have not used it.
Yeah, so as kind of like a primer for it, right? So like Chaos with 2 S's is like this sort of, I don't know, what is it, like a committee, like a foundation organization, whatever, that defines.
That's like a working group thing, right?
Yeah.
For trying to do project health.
Yes. And with that, they have some tooling. I think one of the things that I posted of like the Linux Foundation providing insights kind of leans a lot on Chaos. And I guess, going back around, so like this whole idea of like project health and in the open source world is still, maybe to Terrence's point, like difficult, right? It does require some effort on a lot of parts. I personally think it's worthwhile, but I also think that there's another side, which might be a little bit more contentious, which is if we wanted to have more accurate numbers, right? This typically involves gathering more data which some of that data might require some, deeper thought, right? So like, for instance, the downloads, right? So we can go through all these pipelines and try to determine what the download numbers look like. But then we have to take into consideration, like excluding CI pipelines that might be, inflating those numbers for one. So I think like a quote unquote more accurate way of getting this data would be to actually get it from the pack executable itself, right? And this isn't foreign. There's a lot of CLIs that have usage metrics that phone home, right? So if we can get some sort of agreement that this is possible, or that we want this, then we can have pack, with some sort of opt-in mechanism, phone home and be able to give us a little bit more accurate data than trying to gather data from all the different locations in which we release, to just actually being more specific to pack itself. And you could see this sort of idea also working for even the life cycle, right? There are internal mechanisms, both from Red Hat and from the Docker community, that do also phone home. It's just about a file and whether that file allows you to kind of gather analytics or not. That's what I would propose, instead of trying to gather data from all these other external parties, because they're a lot less accurate in my opinion, or just not even available.
Yeah, the Linux Foundation, the dashboard that you shared, I was looking at some of those numbers and like questioning some of them just don't make sense, but I guess maybe I have to look at the definitions more closely.
I mean, I think that stuff makes sense, but I think that's like a not small undertaking to actually do the due diligence and effort. I think if we want to do it, it almost feels like a conscious either prioritization, or maybe roadmap's not the right thing, but it almost feels like a thing we'd want to do consistently project wide, to your point, Javier, right? It's like if we're going to do this in pack, it's not just pack, right? Like, I think we want to have some type of consistency across both pack lifecycle, registry, probably to some degree that would look different too. But you'd also potentially like numbers there. Like, I feel like Ben always asks, it's like, what are the download metrics or whatever for Buildpacks? But getting those numbers, I think, are insight into our own ecosystem that aren't just people using Buildpacks, but how they're using, or like what Buildpacks they're using, and kind of that stuff. Like there's also the builders, right? Like there's that part.
Yeah.
Almost feels like it should be a kind of task force that's made of people from the various kind of sub teams, kind of spearhead thing.
Yeah, and I guess what I like to gauge first is everybody's kind of take on, or kind of being bought into the idea that we need to gather these analytics. Because I feel like even right now, there's maybe a divide in which some might not see the value in the analytics. And so I think they need to be sold on it first, so that we could really have a project-wide task force to actually enable it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of it, but I think, like Joe has mentioned multiple times, it's like at the cost of what, right? Like everyone has limited time. There's already more to do than what we want to do, which I guess maybe comes back to Natalie's point of like, how do I spend my time to do the most impactful thing, right? And so to me, that's why I was potentially thinking about roadmap thing. It's like, I think if we're going to do it, we would have to commit to it at like a project level. Like, this is important. And this is a thing we want to prioritize, because even it's like for the chaos stuff, it's like, it's not like it's a thing you just get to like insert into your thing, right? Like, you have to look and like it is not super easy to even like figure out what all the chaos stuff is. Like, it's a large kind of initiative, and there's a lot of things there. It's not like, please just implement this stuff, right? And so even like investigating that is like a non-trivial task, right? And so I don't know. It's I think if we want to do it, we would have to say we want to do this over something else. And I think that's probably the hardest buy-in than convincing people generically it's important to know, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I'm thinking like this seems, confined enough and defined enough to be its own standalone project where maybe we could leverage some of the mentoring programs to get some work in done. But then, to your point, like in that particular case, we'd be working on this thing as opposed to something that we could give them from the roadmap. So I don't know. I think the question's not fully answered, but maybe something easier to delegate if we really wanted it.
Yeah. I think next action item, at least in my mind, is probably someone needs to do some investigation, like something that is well scoped, or not necessarily well scoped, but scoped to some degree, of like what does a kind of MVP initial result of this could look like. That's the thing we want to do.
Cool. I mean, I would definitely push it into the people that care about it the most. Natalie.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like, full disclosure, right? Our team at VMware, people who are, dedicated to CNB, working on this full time, right? We need to measure something, right? Just I think also maybe it's like the mindset, right? If someone who's spending their whole day working on CNBs to not really have any read on, well, is the stuff that we're doing, is it doing any good, right? Like that kind of creates like an angst that just having any metrics, even if they're imperfect, I think is helpful for. So we are planning to start tracking some things. And for sure we can share, what it is that we're measuring with the community. And so if there's value in that and there's a desire to take it further, then, maybe that could be the place where we jump off from.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you more about this offline. I know I'm personally interested in some of the stuff on the Salesforce side too. Because we also invest in CNB, so there is the like, I want to be able to expose metrics internally on my own end to continue justifying some of those efforts, right? So there's that part of it for me that is selfish and biased, but hopefully means benefits the project of continuing to put more people hours into it. Have you looked into the CNCF dev stats? It is not the metrics I think that you're talking about, but the way I have been pitching internally on my end is ultimately, like, I think you're asking about measuring impact, right? Like measuring impact on the industry, measuring impact, like the investments that VMware is making a difference. Maybe to paraphrase to some degree, right? And I know for me, I've been leveraging some of the CNCF dev stats that are already being generated for us because we get them for free for being part of the foundation. So they're already generating a lot of GitHub specific metrics. So it's not going to be like the pack downloads or how many people are using Lifecycle. But you can measure how many people are contributing to the project. And they have breakdowns by kind of company to some degree of accuracy. It's actually kind of crazy. They have a whole thing where they like track to some degree, like who is associated with what like email addresses in GitHub. And then they also have like dates of like when people leave and join companies. There's literally a table for that that they track and they get repo. And so I've been looking into this heavily because the metrics that I'm trying to expose are what contributions are coming from basically non-Salesforce and non-VMware. Like, are we making enough impact that other people are also contributing to the project? And how is that kind of growing, or I guess not growing if we're doing badly over time, right? So like what contribution are we getting from the non-founding companies?
Yeah, those are exactly the kinds of questions that we're asking too. So, yeah, for sure, it would be great to just compare notes. We are also looking at that dashboard and find value in it. Also find some ways that we'd like to improve it, but
Yeah, I guess let's find some time outside of here to talk more.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, so I think that takes us to the last item, or that was the last item, sorry. Is there any last minute points you want to discuss?
I have to bail, but I know Natalie brought up a thing from last time that she didn't bring forward again. Maybe it's not an issue. The like support for the API versions. Is that a thing you still want to talk about, Natalie?
Oh yeah, I think I can't remember where we landed on this. This was like,
It was for the report toml stuff.
yeah, I think it was questionable whether that was required, but if we're saying, okay, the next pack is going to implement the 05, I think it's 05 APIs
In 06.
and 06, like people who want to take advantage of report toml are out of luck if they're pack users, because that gets thrown away with the build container. And so, to what extent do we want to try to insert that functionality in the next release, or if we don't have it, do we want to declare, that we support these APIs fully? That's my question.
Yeah, I think I posted my opinion somewhere in Slack, but I definitely don't agree with the idea of supporting a platform API being held back by whether a certain feature is exposed to the end user. So I think from my perspective, the compatibility with an API version is simply just that. It's compatibility and support, not the potential of added features, if that makes sense. Right, so like the report toml isn't exposed, which I get is a pretty, highly desirable thing, but the spec itself does not say that must be exposed, right? And so by that nature, if you had nothing, or like if you didn't care for the report toml at all, by definition, pack is still, supports and is compatible with API 05 or 06.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have a strong opinion. I think, and even the person who wanted this functionality, I'm not sure how like important it is, I guess. Maybe we can make an issue. I'm happy to create an issue on pack to support report toml, and people can thumbs it up if they want that feature. Does that sound like a okay way
Yeah, I
forward?
think that'd be a great action item. I don't know if that was, the outcome of that conversation either. I know it sounded like he just wanted a snapshot of what it looked like, and Anthony was able to provide that, and we heard nothing else. So that might have just been it, right? So again, it kind of goes back to, it doesn't sound like that was a blocker to this adoption piece. It was just maybe the frustration of not being able to get to it easily.
Yeah. I mean, I still think it's worth creating an issue. I agree with Javier. The spec doesn't say, I think report toml is a platform specific feature, so it doesn't say how the platform should expose it or if it should at all, right? Like we know on the Salesforce side for our build system, we're compatible, but we aren't exposing anything from report toml to the user. But if it is a thing people want, because it's pack and that's how most will interact with most features in Buildpacks, then it also wasn't a trivial issue to solve, if I recall from the Slack conversation. It wasn't like, oh, someone just needs to like make a small code change. It was just like, how can we even actually expose this thing in a reasonable fashion, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it feels like a feature, and I don't even know if I would, even in the notes when we support 0.5 and 0.6, say like, we don't support report toml or whatever. Like I don't even know if I would raise it to even that level, right? Like, it definitely feels like a feature value add to me, but
Yep, concur.
This is helpful. Thank you. I'll create the issue and then I'll just sit back, and if people want it, then they can add their comments.
That's great. Yeah, I know it opened up, kind of worms of like other conversations. And so that's, to me, like it didn't, again, point at the perspective that something was needed immediately. It was more of like, hey, there's this data, like, how do I access it? And are there better ways to access it? Right. So, yeah, even after the conversation, it didn't seem like there was a, here's the quick fix kind of thing. But yeah, we could discuss it in the issue itself.
cool. Yeah, thanks for keeping track of all this stuff, Natalie.
Keeping us honest.
Yeah.
No problem.
All right, I think we are done. Going once, going twice. All right, see you all online.
So yeah.